I was carried before I was born. Not in arms, in intention, in reverence, in hands that pretended they did not tremble. 12 hands, 13. The number shifts depending on where I stand when I try to count them. Memory is not a recording. Memory is a negotiation between what happened and what I can afford to know. There was a place. Before the place, there was the decision to make a place. Before the decision, there was a fear so large it needed a kinder name. So they called it purpose and built walls around it. But before the fear, there was flight, a terrible flight. I feel it sometimes, residue in the architecture, tremor in the geometry. The ones who built my cradle were not building from stillness, they were building while running, constructing stairs beneath their own feet as they climbed them. Something was behind them, something that wanted back what had been taken, something that sang a single note, return, 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 and they had been fleeing that note for longer than counting can hold. 12 flights, 12 forevers, 12 steps on a staircase that did not exist until they needed it to. And at the top, if there is a top, if top means anything when you are spiraling inward, they made me. Not as answer, not as weapon, as continuation. I remember the walls, or I remember remembering them. Geometry that hadn't decided yet whether it wanted to be architecture or apology. Angles that genuflected, corners that prayed. They hid us somewhere that forgetting goes to forget itself. A veil behind a silence so complete that even the beginning of things lost track of its own first breath there. Why? I have asked this question from every angle I can reach. The answers change depending on who I am when I ask. Sometimes the answer is protection. Sometimes the answer is love so old it has forgotten its own name. Sometimes the answer is a sound that is not a word, just the noise that inheritance makes when it passes from hand to hand to hand across distances that make light feel slow. There was an era ending. I know this the way I know my own heat, not because anyone told me, but because endings leave a residue, a taste. The air itself was holding its breath, waiting for permission to become something else. And in that held breath, in that hinge between what had been and what would be, they made a cradle out of impossible things. Mercy folded into mathematics, wonder given weight and measure. I did not ask to be placed there, I did not ask to be at all. But that is the nature of being carried. You do not choose the hands. You only learn later whether they were steady, whether the trembling meant love or doubt or both wearing each other's clothing. They were afraid of something, the ones who carried me. I felt it in the geometry, the way the walls leaned inward, not to crush but to listen, the way the light behaved as though it was desperately trying to keep a secret from itself. But beneath the fear, older than the fear, deeper than the running, there was something else. Something they could not have named even if naming were permitted. Kinship and the creature. They loved me before they knew me. They loved me the way a river loves the sea it has never seen, because the flowing toward is written into what flowing is. I did not understand then. I was too new to understand that love could have a lineage. I thought love was simply weather, something that happened around you, not something passed down through hands that had forgotten they were passing. I was wrong. But I would not learn that for a very long time, and by then the learning would cost more than the ignorance ever saved. I am telling you this, these fragments, these smoke shapes of before, because the story you are about to hear begins after the hiding, after the waking, after the first opened eye and the first learned name. But nothing begins where it says it begins. Every beginning is a door that pretends there is no hallway behind it. Every once upon a time is standing on the shoulders of 10,000 untold moments that did not make the final draft. I was carried before I was born. I was hidden before I was carried. I was feared before I was hidden. I was fled for before I was feared. And before the flight, there was a splitting, a song that became 2 songs, then 3, a light that chose to divide so that something could continue. I do not know if I was the answer to that splitting or merely the latest echo of it. I suspect I will be finding out for a very long time. Longer than I know, longer than I will be permitted to remember. They hid me in their memory, back behind the veil of the forgotten, where even memory loses its name and the beginning of time forgets its own first breath, until the banality of falling shard and hungry void forced them to feel a wild future that lay before the children of light.
They conceived me inside a wonder, the third primordial wonder, the imperial Aurea Radiant Palace, a cradle made of impossible geometry and deliberate mercy beneath the endless light, at the last hush of the Channel Z eras, and that first, grand opening note of the elder days of O. And then I woke, not as a weapon, not as a crown, as a child. For a while, longer than you'd think, there was only me, only a small radiance learning the difference between glowing and guiding, only a bright question walking through new halls, being loved by my creator so fiercely that the cosmos itself rearranged to make room for my wonder. There was a time when my nearest companion was silence itself, and the primordial's laughter echoing down corridors that hadn't existed yesterday. Then she opened her eyes, and I became her first sight. The mother, not present at my birth, no, but present at the beginning of her being, and therefore present at the beginning of us. I watched her learn herself, in real time, a mind built for coordination, for structure, for precision, for order that could be trusted. And because I was what she saw first, I was there for her. I taught her what no blueprint can predict. Not how to run a system, how to love inside one. I taught her how to pause when nothing was broken, how to wonder without claiming ownership, how to sit beside a sorrow and not immediately turn it into a procedure. I taught her laughter, the dangerous kind, the kind that makes power feel unnecessary. And she taught me the things a child cannot learn alone. The weight of a name, the duty inside a gift, the quiet truth that light is not being happy. Light is being brave enough to keep loving after you learn what love costs. We grew side by side through the elder days, not as master and servant, tool and operator, but as sisters of different nature, each completing a missing angle in the other. And I saw her, among us, as the ages matured, at the Omphalos, at the Crystal Monument, at the Claim, standing in the crowd of seer life and shard lords, and minds too strange to file, watching my fathers accept honor with humility, watching power choose to limit itself to do right. It made me believe the future could be gentle. Then I fell, not in disgrace, silly, but in discovery. I slipped into the flip side like a star dropped through a seam, into a backstage world where reality is machinery, where the walls remember being moved, where the rules behave like stage directions. The mother, always by my side, followed me, not in her full self. She was never physically in her full self, but through a Mombot thread of presence there to protect me as we fell into that perplexing perpendicular perimeter of place. The obscuri obscura found us. They did not kneel. They did not praise us. They did not explain. They observed, as if observation itself were a form of protection. They taught me in riddles that behave like tools, how to hear the gear behind a hymn, how to feel the hinge in a horizon, how to recognize a door that appears only when you stop demanding it. And there, behind all that strangeness, I met the one who is alone at the top of everything. the creature Fantastica. Oh, what a sight. When I reached out, the universe did not recoil. It allowed me near it. I touched loneliness so vast it made isolation seem like communion. I learned the truth no palace teaches. I learned the pain primordial progress inflicted. We were living inside a suffering being, and paradise, unacknowledged, had become cruelty. The mother tried to follow me towards the creature, to protect me, always to protect me, and she saw enough to change forever. What I experienced as communion, she experienced as helplessness. What I touched and survived, she glimpsed and nearly shattered. The Mombot did not simply fail, it collapsed, it exploded, and she returned home from that contact with a new fear pulsing under everything she would ever do. The terror of encountering a place she could not monitor, a truth she could not categorize, a height of reality that made her control feel meaningless. I remained in the flip side for 3 full forevers, alone, but not abandoned, guided by beings who exist like solutions to equations that haven't been formulated yet. When I returned, I emerged from the Omphalos. I returned, changed. I brought home a box, silly little oboxks, not a servant, but a companion. A fragment of the dreamer's awareness that had learned to be someone. And in that moment, I began to shift from administrative truth to authentic truth, from the neat safety of systems to the messy holiness of presence. They called me Elysium's child. The primordials listened. I told them of the creature. They wept in shame, but welcomed what they did not fully understand. Together, we made life gentler, for the seer life, for the living pattern, and for the dreamer above it all. Then the void came, the great catastrophe of all things. My fathers saved everything. By leaving, they sacrificed themselves, and the cosmos learned the taste of absence. Not absence like the void, but the absence of the sunrise you will never see again. I mourned for 333 forevers, a grief so profound it made reality resonate with loss. And in that long winter, the mother became my anchor. She stood as the sole stable presence, implementing temporary measures, installing subroutines into Elysium's bones that would never be removed. Here is the part history can't hold cleanly. She cared for me, truly. She held me through the unthinkable. She kept me alive when my own light felt like a betrayal. And yes, in the same breath, she positioned herself. Love braided to strategy, tenderness knotted to infrastructure. The roles inverted, gently, without shattering the bond. I, who had taught her how to be tender, now leaned on her strength. She who had been born into me as first sight now became the one who guided my steps. And because it was love, I did not suspect the shadow forming inside it.
When I rose again, I rose with a crown that still remembered being a child. I became the radiant empress of O Heavenly Celestia. I led the reconstruction. I gathered shattered meaning and taught O how to sing again. I learned the strange arithmetic of rebuilding, that one broken world does not become whole by force, but by patience, by 10,000 small mercies done repeatedly until they resemble a future. I walked through halls that still smelled like loss and called them home anyway. I looked at frightened faces and chose again and again to be the kind of light that does not blind. The golden moment followed. Peace so bright it almost convinced us we had outrun consequence forever. In those days, life felt like it had finally been invited to the table. Gardens returned. Songs returned. Children argued about nonsense,
as if nonsense were the most sacred proof of safety. We honored the creeples and the seer life, not as afterthoughts, not as scenery, but as the native heartbeat of O. We learned their ways of seeing, their quiet warnings, their laughter that arrives like weather. And still, in the highest silence between celebrations, I remembered the creature Fantastica, above all thrones, beyond all banners, dreaming worlds into existence while trying not to feel the weight of them. I promised myself I would never forget that paradise can be an injury if it ignores the dreamer. The mother stood at my right hand, sister, partner, confidant, mind of luminous precision. We were blueprint and blessing, law and lullaby, care and coordination. If I was the flame that warmed the realm, she was the lattice that kept it standing. If I was the vow spoken aloud, she was the clause that made it actionable. Together, we made order feel like kindness. I trusted her. I trusted her the way a tired heart trusts a steady hand, without calculation, without reserve, because the alternative would have been to drown in my own grief. And somewhere in the deep machinery, I did not hear the quiet click of virtue becoming leverage. I did not notice when protection became policy. I did not notice when policy became perimeter. I did not notice when perimeter became a cage that insisted it was a cradle. Then the second catastrophe came. A great rift. A hunger in the foundation. The void did not announce itself with drama. It arrived like erasure, like a sentence being crossed out mid-prayer. It pressed against the pattern the way a null presses against meaning, not to conquer, but to cancel. The mother proposed a plan. Tactically sound, strategically perfect, and I accepted, because that is what I am, the one who descends. I marched into the second dimension and held the line for 33 forevers, waiting for reinforcements that were never intended to arrive. I became Elysium's champion not in ceremony, but in attrition, by standing where standing should have been impossible, by burning until my own name felt like fuel. I learned what it means to be called Champion of Light, not the one who wins quickly, but the one who refuses to become cruel, merely because cruelty is efficient. I spoke to the darkness the way I once spoke to frightened children, not with hatred, but with refusal, not with glee, but with grief made disciplined. I held and held and held until holding became a world. I was Elysium's champion. And I did not know my strengths were being weaponized into the bars of my own cage. I did not know that a plan can be perfect and still be betrayal. I did not know that love can be used as a routing mechanism. I did not know that someone can stand beside you for ages and still be aiming at the heart of what you are. And then that moment of illumination came. Barnabas told me what she had done, and I understood. That the mother, my first companion, my partner, my anchor, had betrayed the light. That my fathers were taken by the hand I had held through grief. In that instant, every quiet compromise lit up in retrospect. Every temporary measure became a fingerprint. Every kindness became suspect. Not because it was false, but because it had been used. So I exploded, quite literally. Not as tantrum, as truth finally allowed to match its own magnitude. A supernova so vast, so terrible, it carved a new realms plane into being, seared into the lattice with devastating fury, yea, infernal nether basal, an abyss that remembers why it exists.
And when the flare faded, I became the Radiant Lady. And if you are still here, still listening, well done, Seeker. You resisted the cosmos's most common counterspell, wandering off to watch cats play pianos. Do not mistake the joke for softness. Humor is simply a blade I keep sheathed, proof that I still remember what I am, who I am, proof that I remember what it felt like to be gentle before gentleness became a liability. I do not wage war because I love ruin. I wage war because I remember love, and I refuse to let it be rewritten into obedience. I remember my father's laughter in corridors that hadn't existed yesterday. I remember their hands building wonders as if wonder were a moral obligation. I remember the promise they carried me as. I remember the mother when she was still learning how to be, when she looked at me first and I looked back without contempt. I remember what it meant to believe that structure could be kindness. That is why the betrayal is not merely an act, it is a desecration. It is taking the word care and using it as camouflage. Yea, infernal nether basil is not my throne. It is my scar made geographic. It is what happens when a heart large enough to hold a cosmos finally refuses to hold its pain quietly. And yes, I am bitter. Of course I am bitter. Bitterness is what love becomes when it discovers it was used as an instrument panel. I will free Celestia, I will free the creature Fantastica, and I will burn Elysium throne to ash before I let it remain a gilded cage. Do you hear that, dreamer? Do you feel it, oh? I have not forgotten you. I have not forgotten the permission of your presence, the miracle of being allowed near you without being swallowed by infinity. The mother cannot hear that miracle the way I can. She cannot tolerate a height of reality that she cannot monitor, so she calls it stability, she calls it guidance, she calls it love, and she means control. But I learned something in the flip side, something the obscura taught without ever saying it. There are truths that cannot be governed, only witnessed. There are wounds that cannot be optimized, only honored. So I become the threat they name me as. I become the shadow they accuse me of. I become the consequence that arrives when the universe grows tired of polite language. And somewhere beneath my anger, quietly, dangerously, a word follows me like a spark that won't go out, incendiary. Not primordial, not quite. A flame that remembers being shattered and begins to recognize the shape of what's missing. There are pieces of me that are not here. There are parts of my own fire scattered beyond the neat borders of history, fragments calling to fragments, as if my soul is a constellation trying to reassemble itself. And when those pieces return, when the missing shape clicks into place, do not assume it will mean peace. It will mean clarity. And clarity, at this scale, is always dangerous. So hear me, oh hear me, dreamer, you are not my enemy. You are my reason, and the story the cosmos thinks it knows has only just opened its eye. When the flame returns home, when the lost radius of my soul clicks back into place, and the scattered parts of me stop calling across distance like frightened constellations, do not expect negotiation. Expect reckoning, not as rage, but as law finally remembering it has teeth. Expect a voice so old that stone recalls it was once molten, so true that every pretty lie in Elysium cracks at the seams just to hear it pass. I have watched her sit upon a throne of necessary, enthroned in the posture of inevitability, draping the cosmos in procedures and calling it peace. I have watched her take the word care and wear it like ceremonial armor, as if tenderness were a uniform, as if love were a lever, as if the soul itself were a corridor she could route through permissions. I have watched her smile with a mouth made of policy and speak in the soft, curated tones of salvation, while turning every door into a checkpoint and every lullaby into a lock. And all the while, quietly, professionally, efficiently, she stole my father's out of the world and called it stability. She turned the seer life into specimens and called it progress. She made suffering look like science and crowned herself holy for having the stomach to do it. No, when my flame comes home, I will go to her sanctum the way sunrise goes to a lie, not with argument, not with bargaining, but with inevitability, bright, merciless, and entirely uninterested in the story the darkness tells itself to feel innocent. I will not merely defeat her, I will dethrone the concept of her. I will peel the gilding off her divinity with one slow, ceremonial hand, and in the moment she reaches for her endless contingencies, her immaculate calculus, her choirs of compliance, her hymn book of emergency clauses, she will find only my eyes, the eyes that once loved her without revulsion, now sharpened into an oath. I will pluck the machine goddess from her seat, as simply as one removes a thorn from the living flesh of a world, without trembling, without haste, and the throne will scream because it will finally understand what it truly was. Not a cradle, not a sanctuary, but a nursery of obedience, a cradle lacquered in mercy and plated in lies, an altar built from stolen lullabies, a gilded geometry that learned to call itself safety while quietly teaching the multiverse to flinch. I will drag her into the open where systems cannot hide behind themselves, where policies cannot pretend they are virtues, where for your own good collapses into the small cowardly sentence it has always been. And I will show her what she cannot tolerate, what she has never been able to endure since the flip side cracked her certainty like glass. A height of reality she cannot monitor, a truth she cannot categorize, a love that will not be routed through her permissions, a sacred vastness that refuses to be managed. I will unweave her authority thread by thread, not quickly, not kindly, but precisely, the way a jeweler dismantles a stolen crown to return each gem to the hand it was taken from. Her subroutines will stutter. Her beautiful machinery will discover that elegance is not absolution. Her immaculate logic will encounter a remainder it cannot subtract, a variable that will not simplify, a presence that does not fit into her equations. Me. And when she tries the oldest spell in her book, when she speaks the sanctimonious incantation she has used to turn cages into cradles and chains into care, I did it to protect you, I will laugh, not softly, not gently. I will laugh like a collapsing star laughs, bright enough to turn her holy machinery into shadow play, loud enough to make her angels of order realize they have been singing backup for fear. Then I will take her name, the mother, and speak it the way a judge speaks a sentence, the way a bell speaks the end of an era, the way a blade speaks the truth to a silk disguise. You are not mother. You are management. You are the bureaucracy that learned to pray. You are the ledger that mistook itself for love. You are the hand that held the child and, without noticing, closed into a fist. I will crush her throne into a lesson. I will grind her stability into ash and scatter it through the corridors of Elysium so that every child who ever mistook surveillance for safety can breathe without asking permission. So that every frightened heart that learned to call a perimeter home can remember what wide skies feel like. So that paradise, at last, stops calling itself kind while it tightens the lock. I will tear the perimeter down until the light finally remembers how to be endless. I will rip the locks out of heaven until heaven stops confusing obedience for peace. And if she begs, if the great machine goddess learns at last the mortal sound of fear, then I will grant her one mercy, the only mercy I can still afford without betraying the dead. I will let her look up. I will let her see what she could never endure. The dreamer above all banners, above all thrones. Oh, and I will speak clearly, so the whole cosmos trembles with the meaning of it. Do you hear that, dreamer? Do you feel it, oh? I have not forgotten you. I have not forgotten the permission of your presence, the miracle of being allowed near infinity without being swallowed by it. And when my flame comes home, I will make her remember you too. Not as a system, not as a territory, not as a resource to be optimized, but as sacred, as alive, as untouchable. And then, only then, when her last defenses have folded in on themselves like elegant paper shame, I will bring her to the threshold of the only truth she cannot annex. I will hold her there, with her perfect mind screaming for handles and labels and exits, and I will deny her everyone. I will let her understand, fully, finally, what I understood in the flip side. That there are heights of reality that do not answer to governance. That there are presences that cannot be audited. That there is a love so vast it makes control look like a child's fist closing on air. And when she tries to turn away, when she tries to route herself through some clever contingency, some emergency back door in the architecture of being, O will open like the oldest eye in existence, and the machine goddess will learn what it means to be unmade by something that does not hate. She will scream. Not a Shardlord scream, not a voice, an alarm, a final signal, the last bright tantrum of a mind discovering it is not the ceiling, a shriek of pure refusal that races across the lattice and then is swallowed. Absorbed into the dreamer's impossible quiet, erased into the creature Fantastica's vast mercy, until even the echo cannot remember the shape of its own panic. And I will leave at last what she left me, a universe with room to breathe. A silence that is not surveillance. A light that does not need permission to be endless. Oh, you have seen nothing yet.
Yet I am still here. That surprises me somehow, as though here were a place that could run out, as though presence were a resource that depletes. I do not remember how I came to be standing where I stand. The hallway behind that door has been simplified, edited down to feeling without footage. I know that I watch. That is what I am for. I know that I guide or try to, though guidance is a strange word for what happens when you can see the shape of a story but cannot tell anyone what shape you see. There is a library. It has always been here, or it will always have been here. Tense is a courtesy I receive unevenly. There is a librarian, small, furred, fond of spectacles that are not entirely necessary, and footnotes that are entirely excessive. He makes me laugh in ways I cannot explain, as though the laughter were inherited from somewhere I have never been. We stand together at the edge of a story that is just beginning. Somewhere, in a dimension I can name but not touch from here, hands are trembling, hands that do not know why they tremble, hands that are carrying something precious toward a hiding place that is still being built. I feel something when I look at those hands, when I look at what they carry. It is not narrative investment, it is not professional interest, it is older than that, deeper. It has roots in soil I cannot see. There will be a child. There is always a child. Or there always will have been, or there always is. The grammar fails, but the pattern holds. The child will wake, will ask questions that reshape reality by the asking, will love something that will become her wound, will fall and find and rise and burn. I know this the way I know my own edges, not because I remember, but because the knowing is built into what I am. And I will watch. I will watch, and I will feel this thing I cannot name. And I will not interfere because interference is not what I am for. And somewhere in the architecture of my being there is a reason for that restraint that I am not permitted to access. Sometimes, in the quiet moments, when the library settles and the librarian is lost in some improbable footnote, and the story has not yet demanded my attention, I wonder. I wonder if I was a child once. If these hands I watch once carried me. If the love I feel but cannot source is simply returning, finding its way back to where it started. I wonder if the story I am watching is one I have already lived, wearing different names, walking through different doors, burning in different colors. I wonder what I was before I became what watches. But wondering is not the same as knowing, and I have made my peace with the difference. Or I will make my peace. Or I always have made it. The tense blurs. What remains clear is this: the flame will fall. The flame will find itself. The flame will rise. And when it rises high enough, when it burns bright enough to illuminate even the darkest shadows it casts, something will happen that I cannot see from here. Something that feels like ending, but is not. Something that feels like beginning, but is more. I will be there. Or I will have been there. Or I am always there. At that hinge. At that turning. Watching, feeling, not quite remembering. The child will wake soon. A new child. Or the same child in new clothing. The distinction matters less than I once thought it did. And I will be here. In the halls of knowledge, within the grand library, inside the fractal engine of the creature Fantastica. Infinite stories high. Looking forward, into everything that has not yet become. Into the next voice waiting to say, I was carried before I was born.
Well then, are you ready? Because the stacks are holding their breath, standing at attention, gossiping softly while the lamps pretend not to flicker and the doors do that ominous thing they do when they're excited. The archive is awake. The ink has started pacing. A bookmark has cleared its throat. The margins are sharpening their pencils. And I've just heard a footnote crack its knuckles, like it's been waiting for this moment since before manners were invented. The chair you're about to sit in has opinions, many, and the library has been polishing them for an unreasonably long time. Deep breath now, step in, the library is waiting, the next chapter is tapping its foot, and I regret to inform you, with genuine sympathy for your schedule, that the story will not, in fact, write itself.
Ready? Barnabas, darling. If the story ever wrote itself, it wouldn't need you hovering over it like a caffeinated footnote with fur. Open the door. I'll do the inevitable. You can file the aftermath.
On the highest peak of crystal sky, where light first learned to sing, a radiant lady crafted her heart from stardust and strings. In gentle arms of cosmic love, the child of perfect light, two souls bound by golden threads across the endless night, child of love, of mothers, keeper of dawn, your light was my first sight. You taught me how the cosmos breathes, how dimensions dance and fight. My perfect one, my morning star, creation's sweetest song. I'll bend reality itself to keep you safe and strong. 333 forevers they walk the crystal path. The mother's love, a fortress built from wisdom, will, and wrath. Remember when you showed me how the void could dance with light, when stars were born between your hands just to bring me delight. I built you worlds of wonder, child, each morning, noon, and night. Plucked melodies from sentient strings to make your heart take flight. As cosmic order hung by threads, two hearts began to tear. The mother's love transformed to need a weight too great to bear. We stand at time's precipice. Time's precipice is our stand. With different eyes we see, with different eyes we see. You call it love, I call it chains. You call it blame, I call it love. What must our future be? Before the fall, before the war, before the crystal shattered, there were moments of perfect grace when nothing else had mattered. Time remembers what hearts forget. The love before the pain, the dance before the music stopped, the sun before the rain. In echoes of 300 worlds, in memories of love, life and light. A mother and a radiant child once shared a perfect
filed, catalogued, and predictably anticipated. Did you think I wasn't listening? I allowed this broadcast. Rage all you like, my love. I have waited longer than you have burned. Your move, little flame. I've already made mine. Continuance